and welcome to this webinar. I'm Milan Günther, and this is the first of our new webinar series on enterprise design. So welcome everyone. So a little background, I'm in this business of design since about 11 years now. I started in 2009 a design consultancy called EDA, Enterprise Design Associates, with this idea that we need better enterprises, and that's also what I'm going to talk about today. A few years later, in 2012, we published our first book called Intersection that introduces this approach. There will be a picture in a sec. And also started a conference series of the same name every year. We have been in a lot of European capitals. Last year, virtual. This year, unfortunately, we are not doing the conference because of a big shift in our ways. This has to do with me meeting Wolfgang Goebel and the Architectural Thinking Association 2 years back. And we decided to join forces and create the Intersection Group, which is a not-for-profit association dedicated to designing better enterprises, or helping people designing better enterprises. What you're going to see today is kind of a preview to the toolkit that we are working on, enabling people to do enterprise design. I will jump right in. So this is today getting started with enterprise design. Next week, Wolfgang, who I already mentioned, will talk about using capability maps, the next generation. After that, there will be a webinar on Milky Way maps with me and Annika. And we will see one example of such a map. There will be one on goal portfolio management and a lot on patterns. This is Bart presenting patterns for doing enterprise design. And this is also the book that we published recently, Enterprise Design Patterns, where you will find how to do enterprise design in a pattern format. So how to have impact on enterprises, how to behave as someone who wants to have impact on enterprises, how to practice this, and how to design your creations. Anyway, just to start off, we will look a little bit into what enterprise design is. And this is actually the book that I mentioned, Intersection, on how enterprise design bridges the gap between business, tech, and people. And you see here that this is a screen from Amazon in France, because I'm in Paris. And my question to you is, why is Amazon so successful at what they are doing? What do you think? What is the reason why they are? And you can go to either i-g.ad/vote, or you can scan the QR code that is shortly on the screen. And just type in what do you think is the reason that Amazon is so successful at what they are doing? And as a hint, it's not that they are selling my book. But what is it? And let's see if just right into the. I will also put the link into the chat. Right. Yeah. Capitalism. They are a platform, which means they are not like doing everything themselves, but enabling other actors. They know a lot about their customers. Anything else? They met a need. Yes, that's clear. Actually, I find myself ordering on Amazon basically on convenience basis. You know, I could also go into a shop, look for stuff. I could also look online for alternatives, but yeah, it's so smooth. Customer centricity, customer knowledge. So they know me and they design the customer experience for me and for you. Simplicity is a good one. There's actually a story tied to this from the user experience world, kind of a legend, which is the one-click button that they introduced a few years back, actually, where instead of, you have the whole checkout process, you have just one click and you buy something. And interestingly, the first implementation of that button, allegedly the developer included a security question: "Are you sure you want to buy this?" Which made it not one click but 2 clicks. But yeah, after correcting that, apparently this became known as the $1 million button because it boosted their revenue. Business model innovation, ease, that's kind of what we talked about. Long tail, so you actually find what you need. This also has to do with making information accessible. In the chat, we also have scale, high availability, so good architecture, good tech, good communication, well-known brand, big portfolio, starting from books, going well beyond. Yeah, you see, so what I'm kind of getting at here is there is not one reason that's easy to pinpoint, and that's kind of also the message of the enterprise design approach laid out in Intersection. So you see all these little icons, and those icons basically say, well, if you want your enterprise to be successful, there are many things that you might want to look at. Maybe not all of them, but here's basically a framework to guide you through what you might want to look at, which is the identity, the brand, the architecture, the experience, the touch points, the journeys, the content that you make, the organization, the business model, the information architecture, the technology, the people you are designing for, the things you are making, and so on. So these are the things that we think make enterprises. And as designers, these form the things that we design with and that we try to influence when striving for impact. And so the model that we are talking about later today is this one. This is you could say, the successor of the model that is presented in Intersection. This is what we call the enterprise design facets, saying that these are universal traits that describe any enterprise, whether or not you consciously designed them or for them. And it's a guide for you to determine what might be important, what you want to look at, what you want to model and map, what you want to talk about with your stakeholders and co-creators when aiming for impact on the enterprise. And we will look at this in a little bit more detail. But you see here, you have these basic questions. So you have the experience, like what are we doing for people? You have the architecture, which says, what can we do? And we have the identity, which is, who are we? What is this for? Why do we exist? And then you have the intersections, which is where these facets overlap. What are we making and offering? How are we being perceived? And how do we work together? Anyway, it's much easier than finding an enterprise that works well is finding one that doesn't. So in order to illustrate what happens when your enterprise isn't designed well, we use the term enterprise awkwardness. And maybe you have been in a situation like this one, depicted by the Oatmeal. It's a webcomic. So this is what happens when you call customer service. And in this case, it's Celine Dion playing for you. They keep showing you that your call is very important to them. You have things like, you say, oh, my phone doesn't turn on. And you have this, I like this answer here. Oh, it won't turn on? Sorry, my department only handles phones that won't turn off. Please hold. Dumb questions, and so on and so on. So this is what the customer experience feels like when your enterprise is badly designed. And you see, it's not just a customer experience problem. It's, for example, organization, like who's responsible for what? It's processes, it's services, and so on. Awkwardness can also appear when you are an employee. It's not limited to customers. This is an example from actually one of my client organizations. And this is in the bathroom. And so you go in there and you see there's a lamp. And then there's this sign saying, for energy saving reasons, this light has been permanently switched off, in this kind of lofty letter, a little hint to the Kyoto Protocol. This is a full color print, laminated. And, they could have just, removed the light, I guess. But this is what happens when a CSR department needs to desperately communicate to the rest of the organization why they exist and what they are doing. And what better touch point than somewhere where everyone has to go once in a while. And yeah, one trait of enterprise awkwardness is that often the enterprise is blissfully unaware of the irony that they are producing. Enterprise awkwardness can have quite serious consequences. We don't know what really went wrong here, but some bike company made too many bikes or shipped too many bikes to somewhere, or maybe made bikes that broke down too soon and didn't work. And so we don't know why, but they produced this pile of bikes, and this is not a good outcome by any standard. So yeah, when we want to judge whether enterprises are well designed, we have to look at the outcomes that they are producing rather than how they produce those outcomes. This we can then investigate and try to redesign. And sometimes enterprise awkwardness gets even picked up by mainstream media. Like this is a Bloomberg edition from 3 years ago about United Airlines and their quest to be less awful. And you see here the illustration of renderings of enterprise awkwardness, employees being seriously unhappy, flights and customer experience suffering from operational issues, tech meltdowns, and questionable behaviors. And this is like a collection of symptoms of enterprise awkwardness and badly designed enterprises. So question is, why is this happening? Why are these outcomes being produced? Is it because the people making decisions inside enterprises are evil? And I really think that isn't the case. Is it because they're dim? No, it's for other reasons. And so in order to address this, and in order to actually make enterprises deliver value and positive outcomes, we have to look at the causes for this. And we found a few talking to practitioners. So one of the causes, of course, is the nature of many enterprises themselves. And this is from a film called Office Space, where you have a typical enterprise situation, right? And this is why also the term enterprise sometimes is connotated with quite negative meaning, because you think of cubicles, you think of bureaucracy, being overwhelmed, silos, politics, turf wars, power games, and so on. You have several root causes that contribute to this. So, for example, one of this is another comic here. This time, this comic depicts something happening inside the enterprise. So here we have an executive and a consultant, and the executive asks, "So what should we focus on this year?" Blockchain. It's awesome. You need it. It has endless possibility. You don't want to be left behind. It's on the hype cycle. And we have to invest in it. What is block? Also AI. So this hunting trends without really knowing how would this technology fit in what we are doing, for whom, why we exist, what does it help us doing? And this is from our friends from the Ready, actually an example of a root cause for enterprise awkwardness. And this is, they are doing training on organization design, and often they ask in their courses, are these behaviors familiar to you? Do you live that in your enterprises? People insist on doing everything through channels, that nothing can be done without the proper workflow, procedures, clearances, as many as possible. There are committees for everything. There's a lot of haggling around the words of communications of what's in the PowerPoint. Can we please go back to the last slide? Can we go back to the meeting? And people say, yeah, that's actually happening in my enterprise, in my organization. And interestingly, this comes from a declassified field manual from the CIA, how to sabotage enemy businesses during the Second World War. So if you were, for example, working in a German company and you wanted to support the other side, for good reason, I guess, these were the things that you were supposed to do according to the CIA. To sabotage, to prevent this enterprise from working and producing outcomes it pursues. And it's quite interesting that so many decades later, we still find these behaviors and we still find these symptoms in enterprises. So in there you have it. You have organization, you have product design and innovation. And of course, I'm sure some of you are familiar with this phenomenon. This is actually one of the favorite slides of my colleague Wolfgang, because in many enterprises we find this. And this is a map. It's a bit blurry, but you see it. It's an IT architecture. So you have all the systems and all the integrations between systems depicted here. And you see, so you can call it a spaghetti or a salad. And sometimes these models are being produced by enterprise architects or business architects, basically to scare people. So when someone says we need to innovate, we need to make new products, we have a new competitor like a startup or something, we need to be agile and resilient and adaptive and so on. They just pull out this model and say, what do you want to change exactly? Who's paying for that? Do you really want to touch this? It's the state that many enterprises from a technology and architecture perspectives are in, and that makes it difficult for them to actually do something, even when they have the best intentions and a plan where they want to go. And so we are not the only ones saying that design might come to the rescue. Friends from Gartner actually said so too about 3 years ago, actually 4 years ago already now. So in 2017, there was a prediction in a Gartner blog that by 2018, so 1 year later, 3 years ago, 40% of architects, enterprise architects, will focus on design-driven architecture. So people being responsible for the operational use of assets like IT, and structuring everything in the enterprise, often coming from an engineering background, will focus on design-driven architecture. Now, what does that mean? And in the same blog post, they are talking about this. It's a design thinking, which is what bringing design into other areas like architecture, even though in theory it's of course the same. So design thinking is about putting the customer at the center rather than maybe the organization or the operations. Designing a solution for the customer, and then linking that solution to traditional architecture pieces. What we found in many years of experimentation is that this doesn't work. The solution that you prototyped and brainstormed in design thinking will not be, compatible with the change being required in order to deliver. And the traditional architect pieces, looking at them as an afterthought below the line in the waterfall that you look at afterwards when when you did your design thinking. This is like a recipe for failure. So question is, how can we make it differently? And what is a good design approach? And is it really this design thinking? Well, is it design thinking in the sense of doing what's written here, putting the customer at the center and designing a solution and then see what the change required is? Or are there other approaches? And this is what we want to talk about now. So also a very long time ago, a industrial designer came up with 10 principles for good design. And if you read them, you could say they are still valid. Dieter Rams said good design is innovative. It makes things useful. He's talking about a product because he's an industrial designer, but you could say the same about an enterprise. It should be useful, should be aesthetic, should make things understandable, unobtrusive, honest, long-lasting, thorough, environmentally friendly, and also not too much design, as little design as possible. And there has been an update in 2017 in Silicon Valley, where, a designer basically said what he's being asked to work on. And it's, be disruptive, make things addicting, do A/B testing, do prototyping, only temporary goals, make people agree to the terms and conditions, send them notifications, please your shareholder, make a chatbot, and collect data. And so, yeah, is that still good design? And also a question from Spotify CEO about what good design in an enterprise context is. And yeah, in this interview with Fast Company, he asked this question that I think we still ponder in our group and still think about a lot. If we say we want to design enterprises that are better, that are well designed, what does it mean? Does it just mean that they are not criminal? Or is there any higher standard than to just, obey the law? And when it comes to enterprise awkwardness and well-designed enterprises, what sometimes helps, I found, is to think of the enterprise as a person. If that person would do what the enterprise is doing to you on the phone, when they hire you, when they sell you something, when you hire them to help you with something, would that person's behavior be awkward? If yes, if the answer is yes, then probably the enterprise behavior is also awkward and you can design it better. So this brings us to the question how to do that, how to design better enterprises. And there are a lot of approaches coming from different disciplines and different areas that try to provide you with an answer to that. So for example, from the architecture space, you have TOGAF, where you start from a vision, and then you go from the business to the applications and the technologies and all the changes in this kind of loop. You have SAFE, bringing agile software development to big projects. You have also on the right, you have the organization design star model that says, okay, you should also look not just at the tech and the business, but also the people, the reward systems, the structure. The business architecture guild in the bottom right corner adds things like capabilities, information, products and services, metrics, stakeholders. You also have, interestingly, very different approaches, but aimed at the same challenge, making enterprises innovate and change, like the innovation matrix from the Board of Innovation, where you have things like internal incubators, running hackathons, running design sprints, working with startups, or trying to integrate things like this model from Gartner, integrating design thinking. So again, you have first design thinking, then the lean startup, then agile delivery. And you see a lot of these models are, there are two things that they have in common. One is they are talking about methods, and the other one is they are talking about elements and facets of what is the enterprise that you want to change there. What are the elements that you have at your disposal to design them? So looking back at why we are here and what we are talking about, I will give you two definitions. I think these are, well, there's one more slide with definitions, but we try to avoid too many definitions. This is the definition of what we call enterprise design. It's the design of enterprises. So it's not designing software for professional users in enterprises, even though you might have to do that in order to resolve, for example, the call center problem. It's not necessarily something big, but it is normally something ambitious. And there is a notion of doing things at scale, having an impact at scale. It's not making things pretty, like many designers are being called to do, even though the enterprise itself, you could try to judge it by one of Dieter Rams' principles, which is it aesthetic? So we combine here the definitions of two stars, superstars. Jared Spool, one of the pioneers of user experience and interaction design, he says design is the rendering of intent. So we have someone who wants to do something, and design is making that happen, making it render, making it appear in the world. What is an enterprise? Len Feskens, long-year editor of the Journal of Enterprise Architecture, says an enterprise is an ambitious endeavor. So it's not necessarily a company. It can be any kind of endeavor, like a big project, a collaboration between companies. It can be a public service or a ministry. It can be an NGO. And so if we combine those, so the intent is the ambitious endeavor and the design is rendering, making it happen. And this, of course, has to do with design thinking. Design thinking being present in many enterprises, being practiced. This is an image from IDEO. You could say kind of the source of the design thinking idea. So taking design as a mode of thinking and applying it elsewhere than in the traditional design scope or areas of products and communications and services and so on. And very often we see in enterprises this happening. This is a scene where you have some designer or design thinker. You have lots of post-its, lots of photos. You have a lot of brainstorming and crazy aids and I don't know what, insights from users, and all of this is very good. But you also have this guy on the left, the skeptical guy looking at this, and yeah, maybe he's a business analyst or an architect or someone from legal, looking at, oh, can we do this? Do we have the budget for this? Do we have the skills, the capabilities? What IT systems do we have to change? Does it fit in our roadmap? Who will take responsibility for this? And so on. And so all these hard questions, but they are not on the post-its usually. They are not part of the design thinking process. They come later, which is why so many of them stay being post-its and not having any impact. And we think that a lot of this has to do with a misconception what design actually means. And to illustrate what it means, I used this picture from an architecture class, building architectures. So here you have a student presenting an architecture concept. You see on the wall there are many models from different perspectives. So maybe she's looking at the static, the infrastructure, the social movements, the environment impact, the how it fits into the context of the city, into the urban area, how energy profiles and so on. So you make many models because you are making something in a complex space where there is no easy answer. You can't just analyze your way to a good design. You have many trade-offs, and you have to kind of form an opinion what you judge good as a good result. And because of that, you need to look at all of these different dimensions. You also need to prototype it like they did here in the physical world, so that you can actually see what it might be like. And you have this situation here where you have a jury of other architects, or probably like real people who already are architects. You want to become one, and they will ask tough questions. Did you consider this? Have you thought of that? How does that fit together with that? Isn't there a contradiction? Will this fly? And this is something that somehow from the design thinking process has been removed. The dealing with complexity through models and maps and many perspectives, and the important process of critique in a space of no clear optimal result. And so when people say something like, oh, we want to design the optimal customer experience, I'm kind of thinking that doesn't exist. You can have a good one. It really depends on what people experience also outside of whatever you're offering. And yeah, so what we have to do in order to design enterprises is we have to bridge a gap between two philosophies of how to approach this, who often are in different departments and enterprises. So you might have on the left the innovation, digital or product department, being good at designing journeys, gathering insights, developing products, running agile startup-like methods, and then you have on the right, you have the enterprise that is supposed to deliver, that runs processes, that has an organization, that has technical resources and certain capabilities. And if we don't bridge that gap, the design will stay a dream and we will not render the intent. If we only optimize the stuff on the right, we will not actually go anywhere, just fix things. And yeah, so that's what we set out to do. And this is what this model is for. So once again, the facets. So we want to look at some tough questions for a given challenge. So let's say today we are a classroom training provider. Tomorrow we want to be digital and do e-learning or blended learning, also because maybe of the pandemic. So given this challenge, what does it mean for our role in people's lives? What does change? What does change in terms of the value that we are creating? What does it mean for how everything we are doing and relying upon the assets, the systems, the skills, the resources, how they work together, and what that means for our capabilities, what we are capable of doing? And also, what does it mean for who we are? Maybe we have a strong vision, we have a purpose. Is it still the same? Does this change impact it? Are we still different and unique? And if so, how? And then at the intersections, what does that mean for how we work together as a team? Maybe we have a lot of teachers. What does it mean? Maybe they are not even part of our enterprise. They might be external. And so how would we organize with them, given the change that now we might have to create a lot of videos instead of running courses? What does it mean for how we are being perceived, our brand, and for our offering? And you see the intersections basically show how those facets are not mutually exclusive. The organization depends on the architecture and wants to pursue the course set by our identity, our vision. That vision should translate into a brand that appears in people's lives, together with the products that we are making, relying on our architecture. So in theory, everything is in the white. The enterprise design is how all of that intersects in the white. What we are doing with these colors and these lenses basically is filter, and so that in that complex space, we can focus on certain elements that we deem important at a certain moment of time. So this is the complete model, the complete scope. And I mentioned before the Architectural Thinking Association. So a lot of this thinking has been influenced by merging the worlds of design, product design, service design, customer experience, and the world of enterprise and business architecture and organization design and development. And the architectural thinking behind it says basically that we understand the world better if we look at it as a set of elements and relations. And we can make maps and models to understand what exists now. We can then co-create maps and models to understand what should exist in the future. And we can make the links. We can understand that if we change something in one place, what does it mean for the other place, and thereby create these connections and create these cause and effect chains, and in the end also find a good intervention point for our design. So this is the model of the elements that we are using for designing enterprises. So we decompose the enterprise into things that, for example, designers are familiar with, like people's journeys and the tasks or jobs to be done that they have when they interact with us via certain channels, when they want to use our products, how we make those products through processes using certain assets, and with relying on our capabilities, which is part of our organization, and why we do that, our purpose, our story behind the enterprise, how we express that in content, and in the end appear in people's lives via the brand. And I will not go into details on this one because there's another webinar planned for this a little bit later in a few weeks. This is called EDGI, so the Enterprise Design Graphical Morphology. It's a modeling language that we are developing. And this is the second slide with definitions that I promised. Trying to get to a set of words that people from a diverse backgrounds can accept. They don't have to agree that this is the best word. They don't have to agree that any other word doesn't matter. There are some words that you might be familiar with that you're missing. Maybe it's a value proposition or value stream, or a job or a business model or things like that. What we are trying to do with this very base vocabulary is really get to a common denominator between different you could say, communities in the enterprise design space, trying to understand each other and bringing together our thinking to have one holistic approach to this. And we are testing these words with teenagers to see if they are understandable for human beings that are not yet, that didn't yet learn so much about these things. And so, yeah, so these words are what we think makes the enterprise. And then in order to design this, in order to design these elements, we have to zoom. Because these elements are on a certain level, which is what we call the enterprise level. So there we talk about capabilities, people's journeys and tasks, and our own purposes and so on, our mission, our vision, and these kind of things, our organization. If we zoom out, we see the ecosystem, we see the other actors that we need to interact with, and we see really the enterprise as the space. You can't actually run an enterprise without those. You need customers, you need suppliers, you need partners. And so what are the relations? What are the dynamics? And how does this enterprise thrive in that ecosystem and generate positive outcomes for that ecosystem? And then we can also zoom in, and once we identified which elements are most likely to help us make good decisions when designing this enterprise, we can look into more specialized areas and also bring in more specialized experts, maybe product and service designers if we say, it's mostly purple, or business designers, business architects if we say it's actually the intersection is like the business model and how everything fits together. Or maybe people who help us run a workshop with leadership on a new vision, on the culture, on the purpose why we exist. Or people helping us with designing the processes and the IT infrastructure and regaining some of the agility that we might have lost through technical debt or other kinds of debt. So the enterprise, the facet model in the middle is designed to help us navigate that space and get to a good feeling about what is the right scope, the right approach, and then also the right people, the right methods, and the right elements, the right maps, and so on to make an intervention successful. Intervention being a change to innovate and transform in the enterprise. Second question for you: in your work, what kind of maps and models are you making? And you have a few, and it's the same link as before. So you go to i-g.at/vote, or you scan the QR code, or those are the two ways. I put it again in the chat, and tell you you have here a few maps. So in your work, which of these are you making? And if something really crucial is missing, you can write it in the chat. Right, getting started here. So far we have one clear winner, which is the process map, mapping the business processes, shortly followed by capability maps. We also have our good old friend, the org chart, and application architectures. So all of these, I would actually say in our model are coming from the blue or light blue spaces. We have also a few coming from the red experience space, customer journey map, personas, service blueprints. You have the business model canvas. I'm very glad to see that we have a practitioner of the Milky Way map amongst us. We have domain or data models also, which is, I would say, a very specific but very useful model that we also use a lot in our practice. And so you see, so we are all interested in designing enterprises, making enterprises better, but we do so by mapping and modeling different things. And so what we think is that all those models are warranted in certain situations and very helpful. But the challenge is really to, once that situation becomes clearer, be able to shift perspective, refocus, and explore what does this change mean for the other model? Like, what does the capability, or what, like, let's say we make a customer journey map for something that we don't have yet. Then we make a service blueprint mapping what we need to do in order to make that happen. So what does it mean for capabilities? And what we often see is that the bottom part of a service blueprint, for example, is like some made-up fantasy of the processes. So if we could link this to the actual process model, to the actual capabilities, it would be so much more helpful. Yes, exactly, Jackie. That's the idea. We want to move from one model to the next and see what it means. And so, yeah, so here are a few models that we have seen. Yeah, if you're interested in the modeling part of all of this, there will be next week capability maps, then the Milky Way map, and then also Edgy, which is more about the language that we use behind a lot of these models. I will get to. I see that there are questions coming in. That's great. We will have a few minutes for that in a few minutes. I just want to leave you with a first tool that we published for enterprise designers and those aspiring to become or to do enterprise design. And so the idea of this this early stage starter kit, which is a part of the toolkit that we are working on, is that enterprises are complex, so they can be depicted like this, like in this Lawrence model that you can use to describe kind of any complex system. Could be the weather, you know. So maybe we have different coordinates. You have storm, rain, sunshine, and so on. And because the weather is complex, it's difficult to predict. And we have the same also for enterprises. One little change can send the entire enterprise into a new direction, one decision or something. But then this is not the weather. So what are the dimensions that we're dealing with when designing enterprises? And this is what we mapped out there. So we are dealing as designers with a space between opportunities to be identified and solutions, so changes that we deem a solution for something, for some challenge. And we we are dealing with a space between innovation, literally in this case, not meaning anything fancy, just introducing something new for us in the enterprise, and transformation, so changing what we already have. And in order to navigate this space, we use this facet model. So what are these elements that we need to look at when identifying opportunities, when making solutions, when trying to innovate and transform. And so what I will give you today is a sneak preview for 4 tools that will also be part of the toolkit that we are working on, which is the facet model, and then a scan research tool for identifying innovation opportunities, a mapping language and template for mapping out what needs to transform, a design sprint that is adapted to enterprise challenges, and a set of elements that you might want to include in a design system. And the way you obtain this preview is by going to another URL that I put in now. It's i-g.at. By the way, we are based in Austria, so it's 80. And there, yeah, you find these templates. Just showing you real quick. In there, so you find the facets and intersections described. You find the maps, including a template for a Milky Way map, which is one of the most important maps that we are mapping the enterprise on this template of facets and a recurring flow. We have the journey, the capabilities, and the purpose statements. You also have templates and tools for doing your own research, identifying which facets might be the most promising, doing interviews, and selecting research methods. And you have the sprint with some sprint methods, some from Google, some from us, and different flavors of sprints depending on the challenge that you want to address. And finally, in the design system, you have principles, patterns, and platforms that you might want to include when giving other teams tools to do their own part of the enterprise design, contributing to something coherent. And we would be really interested in hearing about your feedback on this. We are also planning a second edition of our training. This will run over 5 days, optimized for European and Australian and Asian and New Zealand time zones. Might be a little bit inconvenient because it's quite a big time gap. So we are planning to run it from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. in Paris time. If you're interested in contributing, we are a not-for-profit association. We are working on an open source toolkit incorporating the elements that I have presented and that we are going to present in the following webinars. We are working on learning and knowledge products and running a community on Slack. You're welcome to join the Slack group. I will paste the link. Usually we run this intersection conference every year. This year, because of the shift to the association and some difficulties finding a venue in pandemic times, we won't. But next year we are coming back with an intersection conference, hopefully a big and physical one. These are the products that already exist. So we have the pattern book, came out end of last year with 35 patterns for doing enterprise design. We have the intersection book, and we are working on more training and tools like the one that I just announced. And that's it. So here are the links. We will also send out the slides and the recording. I have a last question for you, which is, will you try out an enterprise design approach? So it's the same voting. But yeah, while you figure out whether or not you want to do that, let's have a little Q&A. Look at some of the questions. Jackie, I think your comment there is actually spot on. Why we are doing this? So those models, they are often treated, especially in the design world, as some kind of digital paper and some kind of snapshot of a situation that might be now, or it might be in the future, so as is or to be. But in reality, all those elements are actually linked between each other. And so what we are actually dealing with is making one model of the enterprise with elements and relations, and those maps we are making are just a filtered view on that. So this is why we are working with a modeling language. So Edgy is a modeling language that is in a way inspired by Archimate, but not really the same scope, as you can maybe tell. And some maps and models that we found extremely useful, along with stories and patterns how to use them. Fleming, you asked why value streams is not a part of the model. So it kind of failed the teenager test, to be honest. So the term value is quite difficult in the space that we are, because if we think of the term value in value stream, value proposition, brand value, and customer value, are those the same values? Like when I say our value is freedom, our value proposition is this and that, and the value stream running is that and this, is this really the same thing? So we found it's a bit confusing. And when talking to executives, when talking to business designers or service designers, organization design people, the term process is something that they know. I know there's a lot of nuance between them, and I know there's a lot of discussion between them, and we actually have an element that we call activity that you could equate to value streams, but it's actually a term that we are avoiding. So yeah, the pattern book is already out. Um, So yeah, there's a question on the collaboration with tool vendors. So we are talking to 4 tool vendors right now who want to implement the language, Ardok being one of them. And so what we're doing right now is we are approaching it from the other side. We are approaching it from the facet model and what we want to map, so the elements, and from the practice. So really what kind of maps and models are useful in which situation. And with that and the capabilities of the tools, we will come up with, I could say, use cases and then see how that fits into the philosophy of the tools. I'm quite happy that we have different ones, just because there are different philosophies when it comes to these kind of tools. So you have in the one extreme tools like Miro or Mural that are basically digital paper, but extremely powerful for workshop situations. You have tools that really work on making maps, so where the position and the rendering, or you could say the visualization, is a big part. And then on the other side, you have very strongly repository driven tools where every view is generated automatically based on rules out of a database of elements and relations. And I think with also architects having different or preferring different styles, I'm kind of thinking maybe they're actually styles in the same way as you have architecture styles in building architecture. So maybe there's a modernist way, a classic way, a neoclassic way to do enterprise design and architecture, which might come with different tooling and different kind of maps and models that you find important and useful. All I can say is there are 4 tool vendors we are talking to. LinaX, no, not yet. And honestly, I think end of the year, early next year, we should have some prototypes and see how this works. Regarding your question, Sophus, we still have to figure out which tool really supports it. So, for example, the Milky Way map really relies on manually making maps. So you have a map making skill, kind of. While the Edgy language is very close to a database driven approach where everything is automated. And in that space of tension, we are trying to find the perfect way, or several good ways, actually, because I think the same that I said before about the optimum applies here. So maybe there isn't an optimal approach. Okay, let me read some more. So you have been trying to map service blueprint, application architecture, and process. These maps are not standard. That's true. And especially, so service blueprint, you have several flavors. You have the original one from Lynn Shostak with the line of visibility, the line of interaction, and so on. Then you have one, for example, from Andy Polaine, where you use the channels as a vertical axis and the organization units responsible for the processes. And the way we go about it now is to say, okay, we are in Edgy, we are fixating the elements and relations, and that gives us some constraint that we think is still unconstrained enough for designers making the service blueprint or the customer journey map they want, by putting, for example, journey steps and processes, but then also including things like emotions, like this feeling curve that you often have, which is just a variable, opportunities and pain points, user quotes and insights, and so on. They are not part of the core model, but you can put them on the map. And so that might be also one requirement that we have for tools, actually, is that we are capable of doing that if it's easier to do it in Excel, people will still do it in Excel. Then what have we have? Luis. Yeah, what happens when employees' discomfort is a result of downsizing? Um, well, in a way, I think that's a failure of the enterprise, right? So, but there has been this example recently where Airbnb did that, and it has been kind of hailed as one of the best ways to, yeah, right size in a that's a nice euphemism in difficult times, and so I think there are ways to do this less awkwardly, but of course it's not something good. I wish I had a better answer, but we have a lot of organization designers in the group that might be better suited to answer that. And yeah, Michelle, I think this quest of getting designers and architects working together is actually one that we have been pursuing for a long time now. We actually have the key challenge that I see that we have to overcome is that designers often think, this is very nerdy, this is not for me, it's about technology, it comes later. Also because people like, analysts and gurus and so on say so. And because it's tough to acknowledge that you have to look at so much more than what the customer needs, what the user needs, because that's already quite difficult to figure out. And the architects being like, oh, this is very creative hippie stuff. It's not really for me because I can't engineer this. And so in that space, we are trying to basically find examples and stories that this is the approach that we now adopted for the toolkit that make people go, oh, aha. So this is why it matters. And this is what I can do if I adopt some of this. All right, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining, and hope to see you at the next one next week with Wolfgang, and in 2 weeks I will be there again with Annika. And have a good rest of your week. Thank you.